I'm here at the very edge of Britain, near Land's End. Now this area has been mined for hundreds of years, and you can just see chimneys and old broken buildings dotting the landscape, evidence of man working the land. Now this area's mining was most famous in the 19th century, where Cornwall became one of the world leading exporters of copper, but later tin became more important. And I'm going to go and see Geaver Mine, which was famed for its tin, but is also one of the last mines to close.
Give me a good sword and a trusty hand. These are the words that Parson Hawker sang. A tribute to this far western land, an anthem sung for every Cornish man. And here's the miner with his arm of steel, his back as strong as any winding wheel. The granite kingdom he calls his own. It has a heart carved from the Cornish stone.
From the earliest times until its final closure in 1990, the global price of tin played an important role in the ever-changing fortunes of the Cornish mining industry. And Geaver Mine is located at the edge of the Land's End granite. And this granite intruded the surrounding rocks, bringing in heat and fluids, responsible for the mineralization, and ultimately making the area economic for the Cornish mining industry. To get a feel for the real extent of mineralization along the coast here, there's this reconstruction of the cliff sections. This is actually Geaver Mine here. Now if I put a light on, this first one, now this actually highlights the veins. These are the mineral ore loads that are stretching off into the hillside towards where the granite contacts are. This little light, really quite revealing. These are all of the little mines. Big ones, little adits, shafts. The whole hillside is dotted with them. And where do we go? How do I get this working? We go underneath the ground. And what we're doing is we're following these ore bodies, these loads, minerals down deep into the crust. And that's what they're doing. They're finding them on the shorelines, they're finding them on the hills, and they're following them into the earth. Really quite incredible. In order to get close up to the rocks and to really find out what the conditions must have been like mining here over 200 years ago, I'm going to go down one of the really old adit mines. Absolutely amazing. This dry stone entrance is the remnant of a mine entrance from the side of the hill that's over a couple of hundred years old. In a sense, the geology made mining here quite straightforward. You scrabbled around on the ground, found a vein with mineral load in it, and you followed it into the hill towards the granites. Now I'm going to do that. I'm going to have to come out a bit to turn around because I can't even turn around in here. It's incredible. Oh, there we go. Right then, off we go. It's absolutely incredible. As we follow this along, you can see the tunnel's wonky. Now this wasn't because the miner had a limp, it's actually because they're following the angle of the load up through the rocks. And really, it's not much wider than my shoulders because all I had to do was mine as far as they could get into the rocks. And that really just meant as wide and as tall as one human man. In the 1700s, they were a bit shorter than me. This tunnel is barely my shoulder height. I'm having to crouch to go through it. Back in the late 1700s, what they were finding were small veins like this, carrying mineral load, and they were cutting through the rocks by hand to essentially get themselves, hopefully, to a bigger load further in the hillside, which they'd then mine out. Now remember, they're doing this by hand. The further they go in, the further they've got to take the ore out. Let's see if I can get that round again. Oh. Starting to open out now. This looks like an old shaft. There you go. You can actually see a much wider load, mineral load there. They obviously got to this point and realised they were starting to get into a much wider load. Possibly there was some ore-rich material here. It looks like they've worked this a little bit more. Let's go and explore some more, come on. I mean, here you've got some of the old equipment. They were literally banging hammers into the rocks by hand, breaking through and taking fresh rock. It was really hard work, and we're here with these wonderful LED lights and able to walk around. In those days, this candle is a good sort of way of remembering back to the fact that they were doing most of this under candlelight, little gas lamps and so on. The conditions here were dark, dingy. There was lots of dust flying around as they're banging and crashing the rocks. Really not a pleasant working environment at all. I don't think I'd like to be here when they were doing that. It's opening out again now. Whoa, there we go. There's another shaft. Look, there's another candle here as well. Candle marks the spot. They obviously found something here. They've got, you can actually see the load running up the rocks here, and they've made a shaft up probably towards the surface, so they've actually probably found a bit of good high-grade material in here, and they've worked it. Any of the areas underground where it opens up and you can actually move about is probably where they found something good. Wow, incredible. Here we go. A lump of granite. This is, look at that, black country rock there, metamorphic country rock, and granite in contact. This is what they were working towards, because the miners instinctively knew that if you go from the country rock in towards the granite, that's the zone of mineralization, and that's where they were heading. Right, it's opening out again here. You can see there's a grill here to stop me going downwards, and they put some protective thing above. They must have found some ore here, and this is what they were looking for. Massive cassiterite. It's about 60 to 70% tin by weight, and it's really heavy. They would have stoped this ore up and down, but then once they've dug it out of the surrounding rocks, they've actually got to drag it out the mines themselves. Here it is again. Here's the load. You can see it running up the rocks here. This time it's in granite bedrock. Wow, they've got some of the picks and hammers. Again, some candles. This will be the front end of where they're working. You imagine having to bang away at these rocks. This is hopefully leading you to the mother lode, leading you to a really big discovery. It would have been hard work, sweat and toil. This is the Victory Shaft. Now, during the height of mining here, tons and tons of ore were coming up this shaft for processing. I'm going to go and take a look at that. But what happens to that mineral load when it's brought to the surface? Well, it goes through a first stage of crushing to these sort of coarse-sized pieces here. Now, this was a picking tray. They used to look at here, find bits of gloves, bits of wood, things that got caught up in the mine. They can affect the machinery further down the way. There might be bits of metal. There's a big electromagnet here. This would stick those bits of metal and take them out. This was then taken further and crushed down, eventually to high concentrated ore. Let's follow that process. Further crushing down to gravel-sized pieces. Next, it's the grinding mill. It's like a big metal bucket filled with steel ball bearings that takes gravel-like material to a finer sand. Next, the finely ground stuff is brought to these shaking tables. There's 90 of these in this building. It's incredible. This takes the silt and sandy type material away from the ore. The ore gets moved along the table, dropped down and sent off for some more processing. Here, special froth flotation cells which remove some of the poisonous arsenic from the material, and then the mixed ore was sent that way for separation. That mixed ore is then brought to here, a big magnetic separator which separates the high grade stuff out, which is sent this way to the dryers. So almost its final journey is through these big heaters where it's dried, and you end up with this high concentrated ore powder, really fine, that material there. So we've gone from a solid rock carved out of the ground to this high concentrated tin ore. Now I said that wasn't its final part because this is then shipped off to smelters. Here's a bag of it with Giva Tin Mine written on it to produce this, a solid metal tin ingot. It's heavy and it's expensive. The unique mineral-rich geology of this somewhat remote part of our country has contributed so significantly to the Industrial Revolution and ultimately to the rise of the Great British Empire. And that's something really worth remembering and thinking about. And it's what makes this place a World Heritage Site.